Zach Erwin. I'm a field specialist in livestock for the University of Missouri Extension. I'm housed in Dare County, be Kirksville, very northeastern part of Missouri. And I'd like to talk a little bit today about managing risk in the cattle business. Lots been made of managing risk, and you know, a lot of times when we talk about managing risk, we're talking about in terms of managing price risk, right? And so we're talking about in terms of hedging options, things that really manage the marketing side of the risk equation. But today I'll take a little different stab at it. And, you know, one of the more interesting parts of my job is I get to travel around a fairly wide area, you know, not only in the state of Missouri, but surrounding states. And I get to see a lot of the times what works for producers as far as navigating risk management and a least cost business model, which is pretty much what we're all in. And we've really got to look to manage those and control those costs, especially some of the bigger costs, which in a cow-calf setting or even a stocker operation, a lot of times we're talking about feed costs, right? So just talk quickly about, you know, 3 or 4 of the things that I see in some very successful producers, whether it be cow-calf or stocker here in Northeast Missouri. And so be a little bit remiss if I didn't talk this time of year about stockpiling. So one of our cheapest avenues as far as feed resources is the land we own or rent, right? So just a quick reminder that a lot of that research has been done here in northeast, north central part of Missouri. And, you know, really that diminishing marginal returns law doesn't kick in on fescue or a lot of our cool season grasses up here when we talk in terms of how much nitrogen we're going to put on until we get up to, you know, 70 or 80 pounds an acre. And so if we're really going to get serious about growing winter feed in a cost-effective manner, those fall applied nitrogen practices are pretty much a staple for a lot of those least cost producers here in Northeast Missouri. And you know, usually 50 pounds and up, especially if we think we can get it on and get a good rain on it pretty quick. That's usually a good investment, especially if we can give that ground adequate rest, got a good grazing plan in place to let that forage grow. Of course, up here in Northeast Missouri, it's a mixed model as far as the landscape. When you talk about row crops and cattle, we got a lot of row crop country up here in Northeast Missouri, and so that provides a lot of opportunities. It doesn't for other parts in the state, but for those producers that have those mixed models, own or rent row crop land, maximizing the use of those cover crops can certainly cut down the cost. You'll see pictures I took there. Those were in southern Knox County, up here real close to the Greenlee Research Center in January of this year. And so you'll see the center picture there is a mix of different varieties of cover crop species. There was 7 or 8 in there. But that provided that individual farmer a lot of grazing. In fact, he grazed 70 fall pears on that for almost 100 days into the late fall of 2020, and then you'll see that picture was taken in January. And so we had a good open winter. That helped him out a lot, but he grew a heck of a lot of feed on a limited amount of acreage there for his cow-calf herd. And so when we added up the cost, you know, we were well less than $1 per pair per day, which if you compare that to some more traditional feeding hay type cost structures, that's that tend to run, you know, anywhere between $1.50 and $2 a day, or can anyways. We were saving quite a bit of money every day in that sort of a model. So I think that's something that if you've got that access to row crops and even corn stalks, if you're a row crop farmer yourself and have cows, I think this is where you look at growing more wheat as a cash crop, and then you can go in after that wheat, because as we look at research on how cover crops do when planted after wheat, planting date is very critical. And so a lot of this research was done by Dr. Kelly Nelson there at the Greenlee Research Center, and the information he shared with me over the years is that planting date is very critical when you're looking at growing tonnage. And so you'll see that this particular research to address tillage radishes, but the same can be said of other brassica species, or even different grass type species. But when you look at those different planting dates from the 1st August to the end of September, and correspond that to the tonnage that you're going to get, you'll see pretty fast that you get past that first part of September, and tonnage starts to drop off dramatically. And so again, this is where I would say, if you're a row crop producer looking to grow some more feed for your cow herd, looking at wheat as a cash crop certainly is very appealing when you know, planting date is so crucial on a lot of those cover crops. I have this sort of a conversation many times throughout the year, but there aren't very many times where testing your forages, your baled forages or your silage, doesn't pay on supplement strategies. And a lot of times it's not even supplement strategies, it's just target feeding that production to various animals around the farm, whether that be fall calving cows going into winter, spring calving cows. There's a lot of nutritional difference between those production stages. And, you know, a lot of times what we think is the best hay we put up is not the best hay we put up. And so we don't really know until we send off a test on that. And so I would recommend anybody that's getting serious about cutting costs, forage testing should be right up there at the top of your list, because in Northeast Missouri, and I know this isn't that way in a lot of other parts around the state, but here in northern Northeast Missouri, we've got access to a lot of different commodity feeds. And so when we're looking at supplementing those forages, or trying to target gains on cattle where we're really going to get paid back on, balancing those rations is very critical to targeting specific gains, and using those different supplements in a very mindful, targeted approach will save us a lot of money. And you can see the list there, and we've got a lot of them around here: distillers grains, gluten, soy hulls, and obviously we can't forget probably the most readily available ingredient, good old number 2 yellow corn. And so I would say, you know, one of those things that is probably most successful is being able to take advantage of that cheapest commodity. And my crystal ball is broken, and I'm certainly not an economist, but boy, this corn crop looks awfully good around here. And I think if you can get that corn bought off a farmer, off a farm, if you're a farmer yourself, you can use that. I don't see corn prices going up this fall, at least locally. I think there's just going to be a lot of corn on hand, and which creates an opportunity if you've got cattle to upgrade and add value to that crop. And so I would say one of the things that we can provide through Extension Livestock is to just simplify your rations. I mean, we can use very simple feed ingredients to build a ration to make the cattle perform like you want them to perform. And you know, I mentioned buying that corn off of a farmer. You know, just the extra expense of having somebody else handle that for you, crack it, deliver it every 1 to 2 weeks, you're going to pay 40 or 50 cents a bushel extra. And so you really got to, you know, the most successful producers I see, they really are feed marketers. They take advantage of the cheapest commodity they can find, and they buy it at the right time. And so when you look at various storage strategies for buying those commodities when they're the cheapest, and it's usually now into the summertime. The guy there in the picture on the left, that's a grain bin that would have been abandoned to most modern row crop farmers. Doesn't hold enough grain to probably mess with, but you put a little auger in the side of it, and that thing will hold about 50 ton of commodity feeds. And so when you can buy those when they're cheap and hang on to them and feed them in the summertime, I tend to track the prices of a commodity feed mix, and those commodity feed mixes will range $60 to $80 a ton from high to low in the course of a year. And so when you can take advantage of those lower prices and feed lower priced feed when it's higher and get those cost of gains down, that's when you really start to make money. Another producer there in the middle that just got a 26 ton overhead feed bin because that's what worked for him. And he's buying feeds in bigger bulk, getting a significant discount on them. There's a lot of guys putting up flat storage anymore, commodity sheds. If you're got a TMR mixer or you feed a lot of silage, that sort of a storage option might better fit your operation. So those are just some of my thoughts today. If you have more questions, there is my contact information. Maybe some of the things I've said today might generate some more questions, and that's perfectly fine. Give me a phone call or shoot me an email. Sure appreciate hearing from you, and appreciate your time today attending the virtual field day, and hope maybe I've at least spurred some thoughts for you, some things that you can change to help yourself down the road.